we have Ava Mirna from Jintiangu, an organization that was founded in 2012 to create safe spaces for inter, trans, and gender non-conforming people in Kenya. And the organization performs education, outreach, empowerment, and advocacy work. And also they conduct their own research and studies. They organize trainings for medical professionals, police, and other authorities. From the Refugee Trans Initiative, we welcome Doreen, and Vanilla will hopefully be able to join if she's not there yet. So the Refugee Trans Initiative has been active since 2017, and they support trans refugees in Kakuma camp, and they are setting up a safe house. The Refugee Trans Initiative seeks to make visible and advocate for the health and economic needs of the community. Marlies will be moderating the dialogue. Marlies Andre is a Kenyan-born feminist, Black transgender woman from Cape Town, South Africa. Marlies is a political activist and grassroots organizer with a focus on rights for queer trans individuals, as well as for transgender medical health, with a focus on people of African descent. Hi, everyone. I'm glad we're all here. And I don't have anything else to add, Marlies. You can take over. See you before the break.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Good. Thank you. My name is Marlies. Thank you, Eric. I would like to thank everybody who participated in organizing this event. People from Jinsiangu, Ava, Doreen from the Refugee Trans Initiative. I'm not sure I can see somebody else, but thank you for having us today. I appreciate you. So I'd just like to start by welcoming you guys, and Ava or Doreen, you can take the first shot. Maybe you could just describe us the work you do and what life is like for you as a person you are.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ava. Eric already introduced me. I work with Jinsiangu Kenya. Jinsiangu is an organization that works to create safe spaces for intersex, transgender, and non-binary folk here in Kenya. Jinsiangu started in 2012, and this was due to the need of having programs and spaces specifically for intersex, trans, and non-binary people, which was missing before. A lot of work has been done since then, scaling our work from just community level to make it regional, and also scale it to also like an international space. The work we do is also in partnership with different and diverse groups all across the world. And this is made possible by the efforts of the trans, non-binary, intersex people that represent the work that's currently happening at Jinsiangu. So we're ITGNC led. We use ITGNC to refer to as an acronym to intersex, trans, and non-binary people. And I'm really excited to be here and to talk more about, yeah.
Thank you, Ava. Doreen, please. You have to unmute yourself, my dear. Doreen, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Is it okay now?
Perfect.
Yeah, so hello everyone. I'm called Doreen Andrews Chigongo. I am a refugee here in Kenya, and I'm working with the Refugee Trans Initiative. Been working with the organization since it began in 2017. 2019, we got registered. It was a very, very hard time working without recognition, but we had to do the necessary work. I'm really glad to be here on such a platform. My colleagues are joining in, so let's give them some time. What I can say about RTI so far is we were created to create visibility, to create a platform of advocacy, giving refugee, trans, and ITGNC people a chance or a platform for them to speak out and have a chance to create these policies that are necessary for our community, especially being refugees. We get so much sidelined, being a minority already under another minority, and it was necessary for us to do this. And over the years, we have grown so much. So many people from so many nationalities have joined our organization, and we're just so proud to be here. And yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Interesting, Doreen, that you say the purpose of the Refugee Trans Initiative is to give space for people to be able to speak up, which is really important because especially trans women and trans people, we know that it's important for us to have our own voice. I can see Vanilla has joined us. Vanilla, hi, karibu sana. Thank you for joining us. We were just introducing ourselves, and maybe you can take the stage and tell us about who you are, the work you do, and the role your work plays in what you do.
Thank you for that. I'm Vanilla from Refugee Trans Initiative. I'm currently the director and one of the founders. And it's been a journey to where we are right now. And Refugee Trans started as just a group of girls, me, myself, Doreen, and some other girls that have been resettled. Because for the longest time, as Doreen mentioned, we have been sidelined even in our community. So we needed a place for trans women, refugees, to feel safe, where they could share the issues, the daily issues, and just a place where they would get empowered and feel like they belong. So we came up with the initiative, and from there, it's been a roller coaster getting a safe house. It's been a roller coaster getting funds, but we are grateful that for the past 3.5 years now that we've been operating, that we established, we're able to get registered and able to get our safe house in place, and also get some funding through advocacy and just creative visibility, mostly online, for refugee trans people to be recognized internationally.
Thank you very much. Actually, you just answered the second question, because all of you, I wanted to ask you how it is like to work at Jinsi Yangu or the Refugee Trans Initiative. That leads us to the next question that I'm eager to know about. You mentioned that it's a space for people to get empowered. It's a place for people to be able to speak up, to have a voice, to be able to feel like they belong and have an identity. So I'm sure now that's the other side of things, but in the organizational part, can you tell us a bit, Ava, about how do you get your funding? And even if you do get funding, do you feel like as an organization, it is enough towards the needs you have?
Thank you, Marley. So, well, Jinsi Yangu started as a very small group. We weren't more than staff of 5. And with that, we had a lot of challenges in trying to first with our capacity, and also with the reach of which like our work would encompass. So we had a lot of needs, little capacity, and also little funding within that time. Over time, we got more people came on board. The advocacy and awareness that we created around the time brought about different partners who wanted to support the work that we do. And this was very crucial as it dealt first with institutional capacity and further skills to also cover some of the things that Jinsi Yangu lacked in terms of providing mental health supports, community, bringing community together and whatnot. So majority of the work that we do is heavily donor funded. And this is through a process where we consult with communities, understand exactly what the needs on the ground are, what people want to see represented in terms of the change that they want to see in society. And basically that's how we have packaged and curated our entire the entire pillars of what Jinsiang is currently engaging in, from advocacy, awareness creation, community engagement, and also engaging with state actors. And that's something many people struggled before. As an activist, as one person who's trying to engage these systems by yourself was very hard. And so what we've been doing over time with the funding and been getting mostly is sort of like heavily focused around those specific issues, addressing them at both local community level, that's at an individual level, to a regional, and also working at national, international level.
Thank you, Eva. That's a very wonderful answer. And I would just like to bring Vanilla on that. And maybe you can also take point on that to tell us a bit like would you say that you get funding? Doreen, for example, mentioned that to them they are like, for Jinsiangu, it's mostly donor funded with people who would like to see change. So for you, for example, because you're also impacting people who would like to see change, how would you say you are able to raise funds to help in your cause? Vanilla, please. My dear, you're muted.
Sorry. Ava said it almost all, but initially we started through fundraising, like even from the safe house, the first safe house that we got, we had to fundraise the funds for it because by then there were no specific funds for trans people apart from maybe international trans funds that we had applied several times and weren't getting. And basically people, through online advocacy and just bringing about visibility, people saw the need that, yes, that trans refugees that need a shelter, yes, that trans refugees that need empowerment. So we had to advocate for ourselves so hard online and just putting it out there that we are there and we need support. And it took over a year as we kept on fundraising through online and talking to donors from different local and international organizations to try and support us in the work that we do. So majorly our funding came from fundraiser, like online platform like GoFundMe page, and well-wishers that just want to make sure that a group of transgender refugees are safe. And over the years now, that's when this other international organization came to know about the work that we do and who we are, and began supporting us differently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. One thing that is very interesting to me is that I can hear that you say, for you, mostly you've had to do the work, and I've not heard anywhere where you have mentioned the state, for example, the Kenyan government or any other parastatal out there that is affiliated with the state or is mainstream in your funding. So, which is interesting because is it 12 years now that we have the 2010 constitution that advocates for rights for everybody and all these things? And I'm now curious to see whether you have personally been able to witness any change you can say that is substantial in terms of not only living as a person, but also, let's say, being able to be an activist, being able to be part of an NGO or run an NGO and stuff like that. So maybe, Doreen, you can let us know how you feel, especially this is interesting because you're a refugee, right? And it would be really interesting to see whether these rights are afforded to people who necessarily do not hold the Kenyan citizenship.
Thank you for that question. I will answer a part of it, and then Ava will help me sum it up, because me and other refugees started coming to Kenya in 2014, in an ongoing. So some of the rules and laws here in Kenya regarding the LGBT community, I'm not that much well versed with them. What I can say is that in East Africa, that's whole region, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, we have similar religious backgrounds, similar ethnic beliefs, and the way that society perceives us affects the rules that are being created by the law. They're influenced by the teachings that they've been having for generations and generations about how being trans or being different is an abomination, that they're taught by that through their tradition, or that at some point intersex people are called wrong children, and the parents, either the mother or the father, ends up leaving the family because they are bringing in an abomination in the family. So all this history that we have as authentic African people, it brings about rejections or trying to paint LGBT people and trans people as a sin or as something that is wrong. Let me get to the question. The laws here, all I know much is that there is some constitutional act articles, I think it's 162 through to 165, that try to make it illegal to have same-sex relations, to have a different expression than your assigned gender. And these are similar to what I faced when I was in my home country in Uganda. And the difference is that in our country, there is now set imprisonment sentences. There are sentences sent. Someone can take you to the police because you look different, because you talk weird to them. They can use that to take you to the police and charge you for that. And the police will put you behind bars, and you start having to look for lawyers and things like that. Families are trying to push out children so much so that they're putting them into, it's now called conversion therapy, but it's done in prison. Your parents take you to jail and you get your conversion therapy in jail. Imagine that. So most of us couldn't handle that, and we came here to Kenya to seek asylum and to seek safety. And however much the law here, it's in written, still says that it's illegal. They haven't yet given it so much rights, but at least there is hope. I think Ava will add on to that, because at least the courts here have created the time to listen to people coming in to ask for changing, asking for legalization of marriage and other things. At least the High Court listens to that. Our court does not. Our court doesn't have time for that. They don't even care. So it's still a challenge, it's still a battle, and we are hoping that in our very own lifetime we'll be able to see a freer Africa, or a freer East Africa. Yeah, so I think Ava, you can help me with that situation. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. Ava, before you get to that, I'd just like to quickly, I would like just to quickly be able to bring to aspect that the Kenyan Constitution says the Bill of Rights is integral to the Kenya's democratic state for social and economic development, right? And they mentioned that they belong to each individual, and you should not be able to be dictated by the state, whoever you marry, all these things. You know, you should not be mistreated because of your economical status, because of where you come from, your tribe, and all these things, right? So it's a good thing that Doreen told you to come in, and I would just like for you to be able to touch a bit about that, and also maybe now let us know, because at Jinsi Yangu, you have this thing where you call the citizen approach, and can you tell us a bit more about it? And yeah, and also let's be mindful of time.
Okay, thank you. I think Doreen mostly covered exactly what the state of things is right here in Kenya. When you look at East Africa as a bloc, most laws were passed down from the colonial era. And most of them are really influenced by the kind of culture, upbringing that we have within the specific country. What majority of people perceive to be westernized ideas are what most of them sort of try and banish, being trans, intersex, or non-binary, just expressing differently from what society mostly understands, has been one of those issues of contention, for example, for families that live in around urban settings. In rural settings, I think most people just choose to disappear, not want to be seen, and this really creates an environment where we need to start interrogating what really is happening, right? And when you look at the laws and what they mean, they're an actual representation of what people are thinking, what people are feeling. Not to the full extent. The fight for democracy in our country has really been tough. It's been a very long journey where you find majority lack information. For example, right here in Kenya, we have really struggled, first of all, just understanding or acknowledging that actually trans people exist a certain way. An example I'd like to give is when a trans person walks into a healthcare facility, it becomes really difficult. Or when you have interaction with the police, which is the most common interaction with the state that you'll ever have. The one thing they're going to ask you is, do you have your identification with you? And then you find that most trans people, based on how they present, the documentation based off of the challenges of acquiring that do not match their presentation. And then this puts you at a really hot seat now where you as a trans person come in to start engaging with the state. Now, a lot of these issues stem from ignorance, that's one. Two is the lack of understanding or awareness at all of of what diversity looks like for a nation, for us as people. Then even our own visibility sometimes is not something that at the forefront of discussions or acknowledgement. And that's the most important thing that needs to happen. So when you talk about the Bill of Rights and it's encompassing everybody, yes, it does that to a degree. What that does is it opens doorways for us to be able to engage with the state. And as much as it says it, everyone is entitled to this rights, to these freedoms, it's still influenced by the culture that we've had, that we've gone through. They're bringing that our forefathers, mothers, parents, folks, siblings have all gone through. The advent of the internet has been one of the greatest things that has ever happened to Kenya as a nation. When you look at the post-election violence that happened in 2007, with every national crisis that happened, the freedoms, the right that every citizen upholds or upheld at that time rather, all took a backseat, and everyone started focusing more on what can my tribe benefit? How can my tribe benefit? How can me as a person benefit as a community? And that meant that whatever traditions that existed became the representation of what democracy looks like for a nation. And that meant trans, intersex, and non-binary people were not seen anywhere in the fight for wanting to reclaim back peace and mind you whatnot. Then when you look at the kind of programming that we have as a country, the most visible, the most common and understood community, the gay community. Lesbians come second. And then you have intersex, trans, and non-binary people who've never been heard of before. So if you actually encounter a police, for example, during a raid, or you're arrested just for whatever the purpose that could be, the first interaction is always based off of this prejudice that you come from a community that represents this values, and based off of the culture, religion, the beliefs, discrimination starts at that point. And then it becomes really difficult to then to then get the complete range of rights and freedoms that you need to be accorded as a person, as a human being. Now, with the work that we do, focusing on a citizen's approach, we want to look at then how do we design programs? How then do we design a community of care that looks at each individual's perspective? For example, the Jinsiangu's range is mostly within Nairobi, but we operate nationally. We believe in the fact that to be able to create and design to design services, to design to bring about community, a movement, that does not need to be a one-person job, and it has to be it has to have representation from like diverse persons all across the country. So that we formed the Transgender National Advocacy Network, which seeks to unionize these voices, which seeks to have representation of different people all across the country. And with this, we get to see that discussions around then what does a country that is cognizant, that is respectful, that is engaging of trans people look like? Because then to be able to engage with state, you cannot do it as an organization. It has to be a collective voice. Example is like when this touches on issues such as freedoms and the repeal 162 and 165 penal code. Mostly according to the frame of mind for most Kenyans, that's a gay agenda. And that means that trans intersex people then get left behind. What we seek to do as an organization, as a movement, as a network, is make sure that everybody's voice is represented in their own unique way. We do have cross-cutting issues that need all of us to actually sit down and look at objectively and have common goals around. And that's basically what we do. And the citizens approach seeks to do that. As I finish, just briefly, what we do have is an intersex national program that runs concurrently with a transgender and non-binary program. From how we engage with state actors, how we engage in terms of policy, how we engage in terms of what stakeholders to reach out to, and that is very key to actually achieving freedom, to actually achieving sustainability for everything else that we're actually taking to work around.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I don't know what happened. It's like my computer froze.
Sorry.
About that. Yeah, amazing. Actually, what you said is a very it comes from a person who really understands the struggle and what being an activist in a country like Kenya looks like. You know, you made a very good connection between the police, and you made a good connection between how the society views like and the whole state, and that even the definition of what democracy is to a Kenyan, because it's all about your tribe or who your family is and all those things. But it makes you even wonder if a trans person walks into a hospital and this is a Kenyan citizen. What is the situation like for, let's say, a person who doesn't hold Kenyan citizenship, right? So with this question, I would just like to direct it to Doreen and Vanilla, and I would just like to understand, what is your experience like then when you first arrived to Kenya, or you're going through the asylum process to be determined as a refugee? And did you even see any assistance from local organizations inside Kenya or international organizations, so to say? Doreen?
Okay, thank you for that question. It's actually not just a question, but a state of living most of us experience when we first arrive here in Kenya. It's let me just paint you this picture so that it's easier for even other people in the audience to understand. Imagine yourself running from your country, The place you've been born, the place you've been grown, your language, your food, your friends, your family, and you're not leaving them for a vacation. You are not going for a work trip. You are leaving home. You're that part of your life is done. You're cut off from all existence that you have known into an unknown place, running from land. Is everything okay?
Yeah.
I think that connect. Okay. Yeah. So let me now drive it back to me personally and give you a short story. It will cover also some experiences of other people as well, because we are refugees, so this is what we go through. For me, initially when I arrived, UNHCR was allowing us to stay in Nairobi before you get your refugee documents, or when you're fully registered in their system as a refugee or an asylum seeker. UNHCR at that time, it gave us that chance. Actually, they pleaded with the government to give us that chance. And it was a temporary time because no one knew how long we are going to be refugees in Kenya. The government didn't know, we ourselves didn't know, and UNHCR didn't know, so they did what they could. And that was in 2014. But in 2017, so many things changed. So many things changed, and UNHCR didn't have that much power to say where refugees are going to stay. But right now, the state and RDC had the control of where a refugee should live, where they should get registered, how this whole refugee process should move on. And now, because the government does not consider individual situations or a small group of people issues, they consider the general group of people. So the general group of refugees have to go to the camp. That is just that. The government is set such a rule, and that's the way it happens for everyone. You have to be in the camp for you to register as a refugee. So all forms of registration are now in the camp since 2017. In the camp, I'm trying to bring up a word that can better explain to you what I mean by saying a refugee camp. First of all, this place is all the way away from everything urban. Every urban town that you can think about in your country where you are right now, the farthest place from that, because that's where they could get that much space to put thousands of people. The police in such areas, the churches in such areas, the schools in such areas are still behind when it comes to awareness, when it comes to being sensitized, when it comes to the knowledge that they have about ITGNC people. So when they see our expressions, when they see us, they think that we are promoting homosexuality by dressing differently. They think that a woman is dressing like a man to seduce other women into homosexuality. They think that me, a trans woman, I'm dressing like that so that I can seduce other men. They don't know, they don't even care that this is my expression because it's my identity, because this is my authenticity. They do not see it that way. For them, they still have the mentality of homosexuality is a sin, and a man cannot sleep with a man, a woman cannot sleep with a woman. Anything other than that, they look at it as a sin and a promotion of that sin. So when we are in the camp, I was there for a year. When we are in the camp, we are by the fellow refugees that we are living with, the fellow refugees that we're living with, those who escaped wars, who escaped other issues, when they see us, they get angry and frustrated by just that, and they beat us up. People have broken arms, broken legs. There are now 3 cases so far. 3 cases since I've been here in Kenya, 3 cases that I have witnessed myself of people I know that have died by being killed, by murder. One of them was burnt in the house, burnt. The fellow refugees surround the house, pour paraffin and kerosene around it, and set it ablaze to create this fear in us, to create this reject, even to the UNHCR, to show them that these people should not be with us here. Most of them even believe that we are not supposed to be refugees, because most people, even around the whole world, believe that refugees are people who are escaping war. But for us, what we are escaping, what we are being persecuted for, is our position in civil society, in normal day life. Our position and recognition is what we are looking for. And we are still on the run, even through all this. We are still on the run, even as refugees, because even here in Kenya, the country that we are in, people are still in that struggle of finding the proper way of accepting trans people and ITGNC people in the civil society. So we are still living in rejection, in transphobia, in all kinds of segregation that you can imagine, because even the doctors in hospitals, they don't want to be seen by their colleagues in that same hospital treating you. He's gonna get a bad name. He's gonna get a bad CV. If you go to a doctor and ask him about, let's say, HRT services, he's going to look at you as someone who wants to spoil his career. Most hospitals don't even consider that an issue. Some of them don't even know about that. No? And these are the hospitals that are available, these are the hospitals that are there. The hospitals that are available for trans people that focus on trans issues, they are way too expensive, and so very few of them. Even for the Kenyan community, there are so very few of them, and they're so expensive that it's so hard. It's so hard. And the economic situation that most of us have here as refugees, being the fact that you can't even get employment with just your refugee documents. That's before you consider your identity as you're presenting yourself to this job. It's already making it hard for you to have access to money and focus on such things, you know? So trying to stay on the topic, refugees and the situations that are facing here in Kenya is so hard. UNHCR itself tells you that you have to keep a low profile. You're a refugee, you're someone who's seeking to be helped, so try to calm down. When you try to be so loud, or that's why they call it being loud, yet you're just being vocal about the situations that you're going through, you're just trying to advocate for your own freedom, you find there are problems that you're going to face even with your own documents. What if they put on your resettlement country that this person is was inciting violence in, let's say, a demonstration? That is a bad rep already that you have. So we have to stay silent, not because we want to, not because we don't have voices, not because we are cowards, but because at this moment we do not have a state. We do not have a state, we don't have a country that we are in. We are without any nationality, we are refugees. So we have to obey, or we have to follow the rules of the states involved with helping us out. So we are living in a life where we have to stay in the shadows. You know what I'm saying? We have to stay in those silent places that we can have our small peace, try so much to sustain our lives as we are waiting for this resettlement, and mind you, not offending the system or the responsible people who are supposed to help us find our freedom eventually. So let me just stop there because it's a very personal issue, and I will continue on talking about it. So yeah, thank you.
Wow, okay. I just like to breathe in because what you said is really touching, especially being a trans woman myself, that you are just trying to leave, and the United Nations High Commissions for Refugees is telling you, hey, you should keep a low profile, that you are speaking about the things that are going on through the camp, which begs the question, so what happens when you are assaulted inside the camp? Shouldn't you speak about it for the sake of not being loud? So you see the contradiction that is in my head. But with that, I would just like to continue on that same line of discussion, and I'd like to bring in Vanilla, and I would just like you to tell me, Doreen touched on the social aspects and intercrossed them with like the legal aspects of living as a trans person. But specifically here, I'm interested in the asylum process. So when you have come and said that I'm a refugee, I would like to be determined as a refugee in the name of protection or political asylum, etc. So do you even feel safe when you're doing that interview, the asylum interview, to say that I am a trans person, and the reason why I'm running from my home is that Museveni and company recently passed a law that will see trans and queer people being persecuted and followed actively, and I'm here now. So do you feel even safe to speak to these interviewers who are doing these interviews for asylum? Let's say they're from the UNHCR. Vanilla?
Thank you for that. As Doreen said, the system changed over the years. About since 2017, now people have been registered to the camp. But when we came, I'll speak from my personal experience. When we came, we were registered as urban refugees by then. And once you approach the UNHCR, by then we had, they're called, what are they called? Vocal, those responsible for LGBTI cases by then. So when you would approach the office, and because the UN was working along RAS, that's the Kenyan government, side to side. So we were interviewed by fellow Kenyans, and some of them were very homophobic and transphobic as well. My experience, basically, when I was registering, during the registration process, I had to go through several hectic channels. And from being sent to different offices, from acquiring documents, from having interviews about why you left your country, why you're here, what caused you to leave, and all that. And sitting down and explaining to someone who is typing and doesn't really understand who you are and what you're all about. And it reached a point whereby in the different sections of the interview, one lady asked me, like, do you have to be this way? Why can't you turn away and give your life to Christ or something? Why can't you, like, just repent and change and just be someone different? So I asked her, what do you mean by someone different? And she's like, I believe you are born not a woman, so you're trying to inflict yourself on being a different gender that you are born from. I couldn't understand, like, why is like a UNHCR or a RAS officer like asking me all this question, or demanding to know about my gender, or how I feel I should be, or how I feel, or who I should be. So a lot of people have gone through this, and it's been really challenging, whereby sometimes you go back home and ask yourself, like, really, was I meant to be born? Was I meant to be in this life? Why am I so different from everyone? Or why am I like maybe special or something? So it's been really tough, like, during some of these interviews, and they make you feel like you don't belong, or you're not they make you actually feel like what you are claiming to be, it's not what it is, or it's not how you should be. So you just have to put on a thick skin and just, forego what you believe, that this is who I am and this is why I'm here. And it's I don't know, but it's been really tough, like during interviews and them asking you so many personal questions about intimacy, about how you feel being a woman and how you go about your life. And it's been a challenge. And after even the interview, you still have to follow up with your case and to get to know how far things are about your case and get to know when you're getting your eligibility, when are you being accepted as a refugee so that you get resettlement process, you start the resettlement process. And this might even take about 4 to 5 years. Like some of us have been here for 4 or 5 years, others have been here for 6, 7 years. So it depends also with the caseworker that you're assigned to. If they don't like you, they'll just, write anything they feel like on your case and keep it aside, and whoever comes and continues from there has to pick the pieces and see what to add on and see what to deduct. And generally it's hectic having to deal with people who don't really understand what you're all about or who you are, and having to have this different appointment and explaining to different people about who you are and why, the major reason why you ran away from your country to become a refugee.
That is very deep. And personally, I would just like to say that you both and even Ava, you're very strong people to be able to go through that in a personal aspect, but be able to still decide, you know what, I cannot sit down and just watch things go by. So I just like also to understand that and now speak about maybe things that we can you are able to do to provide a bit of solutions if there's any. Um, I know that you're setting up a safe house and you're in the process of doing the fundraising. How has that been going for you? And what are the challenges you're facing?
As always, there are always good days and bad days, definitely, while doing this work. And during the safe house, we, over a period of 1 year, let's say last year, actually, I think, yeah, last year, we've had to move about 4 times to different safe houses due to insecurity reasons, eviction, either the landlord finding out about the work that you guys are doing or who you are, or the agents of the house or the caretaker comes across the person who is dressed differently and reports this. So it's been challenging. And also sometimes these donors also get tired because you're requesting for funds over and over again to shift or move to a new safe house from a period of time. To them, they won't understand the content of it. They won't understand that for sure these people are vulnerable and they need to be somewhere safe. So we had to move to different locations, to different safe houses, just in search for security and a place where we would be safe. Even the neighbors themselves, will be talking about the people living in the house, how they are. And that was even one of the reasons why we left our previous house, because the neighbors were so uncomfortable with how people were walking outside in the street, with how people were speaking, or how they were expressing themselves, or even the people that were coming into the safe house. So it wasn't really safe. And several times we've had police raids that also kept on frequently happening to the same place, and kept on coming over and over again, extracting money from us and trying to harass us and make us feel like we don't belong. So it's been a big challenge moving from one place to another and seeking funds to do that. But we found ways of sustaining ourselves through some lively projects that we've been doing, like artwork that we do as a form of mental health, just to help us cope up with the daily activities of life and the daily routine of what we go through. We also have poetry that we read and sell. And Also, some skills training like bead making, sandals making, just to train ourselves that, yeah, despite all this happening, life has to go on. We still have hope that we can be empowered, and even if there are no funds or funders are not willing to grant us, we can still find ways of sustaining ourselves in different ways that we can sell our work, if not locally, internationally, like the art that we do. We can sell our poetry and raise money for food or utility bills. We can, and some of us, we can also go out there, be sex workers, like so many of us do that, to sustain ourselves, or even to raise money to pay the rent that's of the safe place that we live in. So it's just a joint thing that everyone has to contribute and chip in just to make the safe house run, because it's not every day that you're given opportunity of grants or you're being funded. So you have to find measures of sustaining yourself. And that's what we've been doing.
And that is very inspirational, because you started by explaining how you have been, the challenges you've been facing, and the fundraising you do. But then you finished up by saying that because for me, the way I would sum it up is means to be self-sufficient, doing the poetry, the beadwork, doing the artwork. So kudos to you, and it's very important that you continue doing that. At this point in time, I would just like to take a different direction and go back to Ava. And I've been curious to understand from the aspect of where you stand. Have you been witnessing any police raids that happen, let's say to individuals' houses or to safe houses, if there's any at GCIANGU or from other organizations? And what is the interaction like quickly on the police and queer people or the state, say for example, when you're getting a national ID card, etc.?
I couldn't help but sort of really like connect with what Vanilla was speaking about. And I think it's why we do what we do, and like I make sure that no one else has to go through stuff that some of us are currently going through at the moment. And where the place where we stand, for example, as me and myself, I'm a Kenyan citizen, the certain privileges that I have when you look at that sort of space where like the state's interacting, and also the type of the quality of life that ITGNC people sort of enjoy like in this country. And then you look at what the state is willing to do about it, because connecting to literally the experiences of Doreen and Vanilla, most of us find ourselves in this place where we question the government. We are harassed every day. This and these things happen. What are you doing about it, right? And again, thanks to the conversation that we were having earlier, most of these things are rooted within culture, within certain traditions, within certain notions of what it means to exist as a person with certain freedoms and rights and in different diversities. Currently, as I said earlier, like the only community that seems to have broader recognition, and I think this is because also like of the religious context, is the gay community, right? The first interaction you have with the state is that's the assumption. You are a gay person, and everything that you're doing is gay and contrary to what our beliefs stand for and our beliefs mean, right? And an approach I know we use most of the time is to have a humanitarian aspect to it. Like, please treat me right, please, let's do this in a way that honors myself, honors other people, but that has not worked. And we got tired and we said, fuck it, you know what we are going to do is actually demand for respect. And it gets to the point where you say, instead of constantly trying to engage the state to sort of understand your issues, we're going to state what our issues are and how we need to be respected under the law. And so you find that, especially in terms of like identification, that has been a very huge challenge for a lot of people. You cannot transact money, you cannot get employment. You literally, even housing becomes a problem, because then you, for example, you have the privileges of being a Kenyan citizen, but then that means that you have to produce proof that you are actually a Kenyan citizen. And every time you give your identification document, you're accused of impersonation. And then that begins a whole chapter of your harassment, like with police officers and whatnot. And we live in a country where most people assume that gay people have money. I have no idea where that notion came from. So you find that these police officers will always want to extort the community, because also when you look at the economic status of the kind of police that we are constantly interacting with is below quality of what things should actually be in this country. And you find that that's mostly always the reason that fuels the harassment towards our community. Coupled together by lack of understanding, most of them have no idea actually who gay people are to begin with. They literally have zero idea. And every time you ask them this, for them, it's a thing that is banned already from not just a constitutional aspect, but also like within religion itself. So they actually refuse to interact with you. So an approach we sought to use, for example, as Jinsi Yangu, is interact with state heads instead of dealing with the state from a very localized level. And you find that in our country, we have a very devolved system of governance. And with this, it becomes very easy now to address certain things on a very contextual, regional basis. For example, the context in Nairobi is very different because it's considered a very urban, sort of free and lax environment where people can actually just come. You don't have to adapt certain traditions and cultural norms. You can actually just live free. So they call this mostly like the western part of Kenya. So, but then when you move away to other regions, culture really takes root, and then you find that there's a lot of context that cut across the East African bloc. In the coastal region, which is predominantly a very Muslim region, you find that the context for trans and intersex people in that region is very, very different. And so then how do we program and make sure that everyone enjoys a certain level of space where they can actually interact with government at their own pace. So what we did is make sure that through the Trans Advocacy Network, we sort of address some national key issues. One of them is respect and recognition by government, which happens. And we have fought for years because there are people who've really tried changing their names in this country, which took forever. For some people, it took more than 5 years for them to be able to even get a basic document that says, this is me, I exist this way, and the doors that open for me just because of that are something that for the entire 5 years and more, most of them never got to enjoy. So you find that at this level, it makes more sense to then engage state actors, first at the policy level. And our engagement mostly with government has been through discrimination and the stigma that the community faces. First of all, we do not want to see like people not being able to walk freely in the streets, not being accorded the same justice when it comes to interaction like with the police or the justice system in the country. And so we make sure, first of all, we make ourselves known. This is who we are, and this is what we stand for. Because most of the time, as I said earlier, people do not even understand what the term gay is. So for most of them, it's just two men having sex, anal sex with each other. And that creates this space where it's very ripe with stigma and discrimination on a lot of levels. And a lot of things are very much reduced to how you have sex. And trying to change the narrative from a cultural perspective has been at the core of what we want to do. And through that is telling people, okay, as much as that exists, we need you to respect us to this point. And then that opens conversations where you have allies who come on board, especially from government, who say, okay, I understand what you're going through and these are your issues. We want to understand more. Then why are you a bit different from other people? And then you start bringing the issue of gender identity. You start bringing conversations around expression, what that looks like. And then within that space, you get to interrogate so many things. What does, how then can government come in and support the work that we do? And one of them is actually recognizing that we exist and respecting that fact. So if a person comes and says, I identify this way, they have no more grounds to say, we have never heard of this before. So the awareness creation, different groups make within the country all seek to address that. So having common goals in that regard. And then you find that when you engage at a certain level such as that, it trickles down from someone saying, okay, our boss attended a certain meeting, our boss came back, and these are the things they actually discussed. People who identify and look a certain way. There's people who wear wigs, but they have beards. There's people who have deep voices and will come here and tell you, I am so and so, a very feminine name. And then it sort of like puts them in this place that, okay, then most people don't really want to be inhuman. So they actually think and listen and they're like, then how then can I best respect you? Because we've brought evidence to most of this engagement that this is how the police, for example, have been stigmatizing our community, discriminating against us, right? And one of the things that is very much ingrained in the law, in the Bill of Rights, is respect for human life, free from violence, free from discrimination. And then you bring all the things and the values that our society wants to uphold. Then it becomes an issue where it becomes a space where they say, okay, fine, then let's have a more humanitarian approach into how we deal with this thing. It doesn't change the entire context entirely, because there are honestly like some rotten apples among the bunch. And you find that it's gonna take a couple of years before a lot of things trickle down to a place where you'd say the common police you'd encounter in the street, that would be the first person to harass you, the first person to instigate a raid because they had a rumor. For example, where we have our resource centers, Jinsi Yangu, we had an incident where some neighbors did not understand what the issue was happening like with our house. So it's a house, so we use it as a resource center for people to come. We have activities and different things there for communities to sort of like interact with each other, to be free. We call it safe space. And so the neighbors saw the kind of people coming into the house and they quite did not get what was happening. So there's a local police station close by to where we stay. So they went and reported the case. They were like, we think there's something fishy going on in that house. And there's been this notion that a lot of organizations around Nairobi, around Kenya, and urban areas are recruiting young people for homosexuality because there's money or promise of money or a better life outside the country or elsewhere. So you find that then the police came and we had to interact with them and be like, okay, this is what we are actually doing here. We are a registered organization. This is the work that we are doing and the range of it. And this is not really what this community represents or stands for. Because then for them, it's about protecting society and protecting the children within such a community. So in trying to make sure that things such as raids do not happen, we have to interact with police from a specific level. So what we've done as Jinsi Yangu currently, one of the major strides is contribute to the national curriculum for police training. So in that includes mention of how to treat a sexual minority and a gender minority person when you encounter them. And that has really changed a lot of the work, that the landscape of how much we can interact as a community.
This is a very interesting thing because it's like you read my mind. Today morning, I was reading an article. It's on the Standard. Standard is a Kenyan newspaper. And I know somebody called Diana Ngao. She's one of the campaign managers for Mother Karua, who's like running to become, with Raila Odinga, to become the next president and vice president of Kenya. And in this article, they said, and the heading was Kenyan Women to Make History with Mother Karua. And it's a very interesting article if you read it, because you will literally get an understanding or an insight of how politicians or people who are in power look at the situation for queer people. Because if I can just read a quote from it, it says, Mother Karua is a woman who has stood up for and upheld the rule of law, and one who embodies the national values and principles in Chapter 10 of our Constitution, which I beg to differ, right? Because if you are a person who stands up with the law, and if you're a person who upholds the law, she's a lawyer by profession, Martha, and none of them you have heard speak about how to, in their manifesto, basically, they speak about what are we gonna do in terms of minorities, in terms of like sex or gender, but also other minorities in terms of tribe, or other people like refugees or other minority tribes, so to say. So when you mentioned that it's to go and speak to leaders and people who hold this opinion, it's a very interesting thing, because it points out the fact that it means they know the problem. If they're willing to have that conversation, it means the government and the people you speak with in higher positions understand the problem that we have. So I can see where you're driving with that, and it's a very good thing to do. And I really hope that we can be able to be in a position where we will all be seen as equals. In that regard, staying with you, Doreen, quickly, if you can, I can just ask you a very controversial question. And in terms of like when you're doing fundraising, or in terms of like when you're interacting with, say, top leaders and all these people who are in positions of power, have you met people who have, for example, like said, I understand that you guys need funding, I understand you guys need certain things, so for us, if you get to scratch our backs, endorse us, or don't do certain things or do certain things, we will be able to have funding coming your way? Because I'm sure it has happened. So other than like fundraising, can you just take us through the other dark side of funding? Because I'm sure it's a thing that affects every aspect of being in Kenya.
Okay. Funding. It's a continuous battle, a continuous one, because even funders themselves change priorities. They change the causes that, they change their causes that they are funding for, which changes after year. For example, right now we're having the Ukraine saga. Most funders are focused with that. And it varies whenever things change around the world. They also affect us here. So let me go to where we began to what we are now at. For us, when we began, we used the usual online platforms, Facebook, Instagram, majorly those two, and then later on Twitter came involved. We usually went to fellow LGBT members, fellow trans members, and most of them, they would be willing to help you, but it would be in a one-off situation. Let me help you with rent for this month. Let me help you with food for like 2 or 3 months. That's what I can do. And the situations that we are facing are continuous, are a daily situation. We need more sustainability for that. And you have to understand, this is an individual sometimes who's taking it out of their pockets. They cannot do this every other year. Like Vanilla was telling you, it got frustrating and confusing to people, because I've come to you this month, I want rent, I need food for like 15, 16 people. But then before even that month ends, we are being evicted. Before that month ends, someone broke into the house and we were being stolen other things because we are refugees, we are targets for thieves and people like that. So after 2 years of existence, that's when organizations that fund people now started recognizing us, because the first time, let me give you an example. You're writing to a fund organization, an international one. Your first time you write to them and they have never heard of you, they have never seen your organization, never seen your work, they won't fund that because they don't know about it. So we had to write 2 to 3 times, that is like 2 to 3 years, according to the funding periods, for us to get proper funding that can sustain us for about 6 months, for about a year. So even me, even Vanilla, even other members of our board, we began working in this job or in this activism pro bono. We're doing it to sustain ourselves. We're doing it to create a voice for ourselves, more than just the funds and the money. Are we having a place to sleep? Are we having what to eat? That was what was driving us in that moment. We're having 16, 20 people. We don't know what they're going to eat. Some of them have diseases that need to treat. That was what we are focusing on, and not who has the money or who has the big funds. We didn't even care much about that. We didn't even know much about that. So right now, especially in the beginning of the corona pandemic, that's when now organizations came out and started to focus on minority groups and sexual minority groups like IT agency people or refugees in general. That's when people now started to ask themselves, if we ourselves are going through such a situation, what about such minorities like refugees and IT agency people? So when we proposed to these organizations, those that didn't fund us in the beginning, but had seen our proposals, those that knew about us but couldn't fund us back then, now saw that maybe this is something that we need to engage in. These people have been asking us for help countless years, and now with the pandemic, we all know what the situation is. That's when we started now getting proper funding that can sustain us for about a year, for 2 years. Actually, our biggest running grant has been for 2 years, and which is a very big improvement for according to the work we're doing. It makes it easier than how it was. So funding is hard because as a new organization, we have been in existence for about 4 years, 4 complete years now. So a new organization, there is that people will look at you like, they're still young, they're still learning, there's that look. And then also another aspect that affects us to access funding is the fact that we are a trans-focused organization. Most people who are out there to give funds for LGBT organization want to focus on the entire umbrella, organizations that are focused on the entire umbrella. And we are not that, unfortunately, and we are sorry to those that it might hurt. We don't do it to hurt you or because we are different or because we are special, but because there is a gap that needs to be filled. There is a big space and people are just covering curtains over it and letting it be that way. But IT agency people are really in need of proper, sustainable, and proper operations that can focus on our existence and sustainability. And the other part, which in a way now we are learning to turn into an advantage, but it's still a problem, is the fact that we are a refugee organization, or we are refugees. Funders look at refugees and they expect the UNHCR, the USAID, those organizations that have already been there for years and years focusing on refugee issues, to be the ones that we should also go to be the ones that are supposed to come to us, actually. But the fact that we are LGBT people and the fact that we are IT agency people, these organizations also look at us with a different look. They're already having programs running for people escaping wars, programs of mothers and their children, and issues of people that have been working on for years, and that is the program that they are working on. ITGNC refugees and LGBT refugees, it's more also a new program to such organizations, you know? So it's not really easy, yeah. But we are trying, and I don't know if this is a problem in a way, but it's a limitation in a way, because since we are refugees, we don't have the proper documentations to have those bank accounts that we need to have, proper situation, proper what's the right word? Proper means or proper channels that other organizations operate with. We have to partner with Kenyan organizations. We have to partner with local organizations in implementation of such projects and receiving funds to do this work. And it kind of sets us back a little bit because they also have their work that they're doing, you know, they have clients and responsibilities. And then we also bring in our concept of now refugees, you know, which also is a bit tricky and a learning thing for all of us, something new that we are learning how to work upon. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Barry.
It does. Thank you so much, Doreen. I would like to still go to you, Eva, but off you off the hook, huh? I just basically the reason why I'm asking you this is because I would just like to know the good, the bad, the ugly, you know, and why it's important to move, because we are the new generation of activists, right? To move away from relying on state funding or like USAID or the UN or UNHCR and the likes, but instead to have more like local and regional cooperation, because I say it would be easier because of close proximity and cultural and social similarities, right? So Eva, please.
I think Derek covered more so like the situation literally with funding, especially like if it comes from a donor space. In a country we do not have, and I think most communities really struggle with it, we do not have like revenue generating sort of like projects or income. Like you cannot literally do anything, any type of advocacy without money, getting any type of awareness that's impactful at certain scales without money. And you see, like for organizations, it's about a community, like taking care of a community, addressing a gap within society. And mostly what this puts us is at a position where then you have to say, okay, you have to apply for a fund. This is the kind of fund that exists. And let's see how then we can co-opt the work and the goals that we have to achieve them through a certain fund. And what this contributes to is burnout. When you look at how many people really can engage within one goal of one grant, and seeing that the work that you're doing has to be supplemented again by, say, like 5 or 10 more grants to sort of like cover at least the basis of what you want to do, then it puts people at a place where there's only few of you who have the capacity enough to be able to do this work, to address it. And then the work that is actually there is quite a lot, and then you cannot do it by yourself, so you have to involve other people. So literally it's making a society of activists, where instead of having young people, for example, just live their lives, get formal employment, for example, for ITGNC, people like sort of advocate for things that matter. It's about fighting for respect. It's about fighting for a space where you can just exist and freely just be yourself. And this really sucks, because then we have conversations where we engage funders and we're like, okay, our strategy for wanting to address certain issues looks like this way. But then when you look at the people, also some funders are held accountable by, have certain criteria for who these funds should actually help. And then this becomes a space where we have a back and forth, a push and pull and whatnot, and really creates an environment where it's really difficult to actually do anything that's impactful. For example, currently, as a network, there's work that is supposed to do around legal and gender recognition in the country, and it's a study. And you find that different arms of government demand that you have certain things in place. For example, you look at data. For example, you look at the quality of how you engage with them. For example, you cannot take Kenyan registrars or an MP and bring them to, for example, your safe house or your resource center and tell them, okay, these are our issues, this is how we'd like you to support us. Most of them want you to meet them at places that you end up spending a quite considerable amount of money that could actually go to supporting other interventions towards addressing community issues. And that really sucks. And then you look at the space that's available to actually push for funding that actually speaks to the community and with the community. And we live in a capitalistic system and society. Ideally, that is something that should not be, but it works that way. And it really sucks for majority of us. I love the approach, like we've constantly been talking about, like self-sustainability and making sure that we have work, we have resources. For example, if someone is needs relocation, we have the money to be able to provide for them to be able to move to a different place. And it sucks that it's so difficult to actually do it that way without having someone breathing down your neck that it needs to look a certain way. It needs to fit a certain narrative for it to be actually considered like impactful work that you're actually doing. So our person, as a person, our persons are not considered within the design of what donor funding looks like. And I love the approach that majority of organizations are taking at the moment, especially here in Kenya, with the general elections coming up in a couple of days. There's been a lot of worry. Then what does the new government coming in look like? Does that mean that the funding space might shrink, because then they would tighten the leash on all these different like international partners that are supporting the work that we do. But then what does that mean for us here? For example, when COVID hit, a lot of money for IT people disappeared. Nobody knows where it went to. So when you have partners that have stuck with you through everything, we're the ones who are at least being like, okay, we can be flexible in how we can actually achieve some of the goals that we had with certain funds. And then let's see then how we can partner with other people to make sure that everything works together however it should. But then it's easier said than done. And I think I love the approach RTI has in just sustainability and like doing all these things by themselves. Because then when you have the tools to create your own money, no one can actually, other than yourself and your community, no one else can tell you how to what to do with it, where then to channel your resources and whatnot. For example, as an income generating activity, we have a media unit that we recently launched, which seeks to work with the broader society, basically, to produce content. At the core of it, mostly something that reflects what the unique situation for IT people in Kenya is like, but also that's a revenue source to be able to channel back into a society. But then you look at how feasible such revenue generating stream is like, and it's quite low. Look at the capacities of trans IT-GNC activists, and it's really low. Most of us are not business people, but then that means when you partner with people who are doing business, there are certain risks and certain there's certain, at the core of it, there's something it takes away from you as a person, and this makes it really difficult for you to actually achieve and do the work that you want to do. And as much as money is very freeing, there's a very broad lack of focus on what is really important. The community is important. The rights and freedoms that we want to enjoy are important. We live in a society that forces us to want to conform to certain standards and ideals of what a society should look like, of how society should engage, and it's really setting the movement back in many ways, because you cannot engage with the state without coming in with formal paperwork, and it's very important to have that, which is true, but then the capacity that we have to actually do that, not everyone has. For example, Jintengo is very well placed to be able to deal with government at the level that we're at now. And then when you have other groups that are actually struggling to have a voice to make sure that you can even be in a place to hold certain arms of government accountable. For example, if your documents are not processed through, then it's about writing a letter to make sure that the correct people are actually held to account in doing what that they need to do. And then the funding space keeps shrinking, and most times it's all about the community to come together and actually realize that we can have very unique ways of actually approaching a situation around finding freedom around funds.
Wow. I like how all of you decided to stay positive. So I'd like to say that's really good. Thank you so much. We are a bit over time, so sorry for our audience. And I would just like to say, Ava, Vanilla, Doreen, thank you for being here today. We really appreciate the work you do. I would employ you to continue doing the work without giving up, because we need people like you if we want to have a society that is the one we would like to live in. I know it's hard, but please keep going. Thank you so much. It's a great and wonderful conversation that we have had today, and definitely we will be keeping in touch. So for the audience, Jinsi Yangu, where Doreen is working at and part of, is jinsiyangu.org. Eric can help us leave the links at the comment, and you can find for Doreen and Vanilla the organization that they're part of, which is the Refugee Trans Initiative, already at the part of the comments. For those who are asking about where they could be able to donate, can you like if you could share the fundraiser for the Safe House? Believe it's already been shared in the chat. Thank you for having us. My name is Marlise, and I would just say we have like a 5 to 10 minute break, or 5 minutes maybe, and then we'll see you on the next round. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.